Casual here. In the Dev News Thursday this week, PCF announced changes to many of the legendary gear sets in the game, most of which were buffs. In this video I'll let you know what these changes are, what they mean to the builds, and if the buffs are good enough. Let's get into it. I think it is fair to say that the Devastator gear sets need some love. Outside of the Seismic Commander, its gear sets are a little lackluster, which for such a gear dependent class is a bit of a problem. Two good changes have been proposed to this gear set. The gear set bonus currently shares 10% of anomaly damage and 30% of weapon damage for 5 seconds, among up to 4 enemies affected by Endless Mass, which is pretty underwhelming for AP builds. Increasing the anomaly damage to 40% is a great buff, but I do think that they should look at the duration of this effect. This gear set is clearly designed to work with Gravity Leap, pop Endless Mass to pull enemies together, and then leverage Despair to deal big damage with multiple Gravity Leaps. But is 5 seconds enough to get multiple Gravity Leaps off? Probably not. Increasing this to 10 seconds would make this combo easier to use. Shattered Armor, which removes armor from enemies, will be removed from the gauntlets of this set and be replaced by Mosh Pit, which applies vulnerability. This is a straight buff to damage, as armor is only relevant for firepower builds, while vulnerability works for all damage sources. I have to be honest, I really don't like the Boulder Dash skill, but the changes they are proposing to this gear set have me itching to try it out. The gear set bonus, which reduced the cooldown of Boulder Dash by 90%, will now also increase firepower by 15% of armor. Now this might not seem like it is very useful, but this will synergize really well with the ability Mighty Tank in the middle class tree, and also the proposed changes to the Fortress mod. I have developed a build already that buffed armor to around 1.8 million, which with Mighty Tank in this change would also buff your firepower by 360,000, which sounds pretty spicy to me. Add in the changes to Fortress, which will buff armor by up to a further 15%, and the tank build could become a very viable build to run. The second change they are proposing adds even further to this. The Kingslayer mod will be removed from the gear set gauntlets and replaced with Death's Door. Doubling your armor and the firepower buff that causes is a scary combination. The interesting challenge will be how you can keep your health at 35% or lower, so you can keep this godlike combination going. Possibly using Dark Sacrifice might be an idea here. The final change for the Devastator is a minor one, with the skill leech attribute being replaced with close range damage on the statue gear set pieces. This gear set has a nice 100% buff to your firepower when Golem or Tremor are active, something I utilised in my Reanimator build guide. This change is a welcome one. With Golem up most of the time with this build, you don't really need the extra healing, but extra weapon damage is a very nice buff. The Pyromancer is generally in a good state and has one of the strongest builds in the game in the Ash Blast Overheat build, so it should come as no surprise that most of the changes proposed are tweaks rather than significant buffs. Saying that, the Lava Leech is getting a small buff, with the cooldown reduction from the gear set bonus increasing from 10% to 30%. On paper this sounds good, but I just don't think that the eruption skill does enough damage, and even with this reduction you're probably still looking at around a 16 or 17 second cooldown, which is too long. I don't see this changing the dominance Ash Blast Overheat or Phaser Beam have right now on the Pyromancer class. Nice, but not enough for what is really a good looking but lackluster skill. The developers' comments on the Reforged gear set are a bit bizarre, to be frank. They say that originally they intended for it to be a long range firepower set. So why give it anomaly power as its primary stat? If you are unable to stack firepower, it is never going to work as anything other than a skill-based anomaly build. Just bizarre, and it actually shows a lack of understanding about how builds work. Anyway, there is a long list of stat changes being proposed for this gear set, which do align it better for anomaly power builds. The change to mods on the chest piece also makes sense, removing the Pyromancer's only dedicated ammo replacement mod, which was pretty useless as it stood for this type of gear set. Changes to mods on the waistcloth and the boots of the Reforged and the buff to gear set bonus are all good. The gear set bonus is an interesting one, as it introduces a cycling of skills that wasn't there previously. This will certainly make it an interesting rotation, but maybe not a practical one, as I think in the heat of the battle, spamming the same skill is just a little easier. I also think that Feed the Flames is just not strong enough. Even in a build focusing on it, it only does around 40,000 damage, so a 75% buff takes it to only around 70,000. When you are getting other skills hitting in the millions, this is just too weak to have it as anything other than as a utility skill to apply ash or heal, or in this case, buff the damage of thermal bomb. The developers did say that they wanted Feed the Flames to be a better tool to detonate thermal bombs. Well, this just isn't going to do it. Buff the base damage, devs, if you want us to use it. Not a lot of love for the Trickster here, with only one change being proposed, and that one is really unclear. The gear set bonus on the Trespasser gear set is being changed to also increase damage by 6% per enemy affected by a deception skill. No mention of a duration, no mention if this is a buff for all damage, or whether this only applies to those enemies affected by the skill. It does have the potential to be a very nice buff. Think of Time Rift hitting a pack of enemies and you could see a 20% buff, but overall this still doesn't seem like a particularly appealing gear set bonus. I think a bigger rework is needed here. Only a couple of small changes to the Technomancer, which makes sense given it's generally in a good place as a class with several viable builds. With AoE builds using the Torrential Downpour gear set, there is definitely an issue currently when spamming Shrapnel with the extra cluster bombs. When the mines overlap each other, the cluster bombs don't always seem to activate, reducing the intended damage output. This is a strong build already, so I'm pretty excited for this change to be implemented. The one-time effect of the current gear set bonus, which replenishes 20% of ammo for your Tool of Destruction for confirmed pain launcher hits, is pretty useless. Yes, multiple hits will replenish all of your ammo, but why use this when you can use Toxic Lead or Quartermaster to keep refilling your ammo all the time? So the change to make this unlimited is a good step and will allow you to keep your minigun or rocket launcher active for the entire expedition. Dropping the pain launcher directly in front of an elite is probably the most effective way of doing this to guarantee the hits. I know that there is a lot of noise in the community about why balancing is still happening 5 months after the launch. I wouldn't disagree that it's taken too long, but I also think that with as many mods, skills, abilities and gear pieces that are in the game, introducing changes like this are always going to need a lot of testing to avoid breaking the game with an unintended effect. I am really happy that PCF are continuing to improve build diversity. For me, creating new builds that work is the end game, not completing expeditions. So I'm really happy with what is being proposed here. Until next time, Casual out.